Good evening, and welcome to a conversation with Metrolinx about the Ontario Line project. Tonight, we'll be focusing on the recently released Draft Environmental Impact Assessment Report, or EIAR, which you'll be hearing quite a lot. My name is Joseph Thornley. I'm the CEO of 76 Engage, Metrolinx's public engagement partner for virtual consultation. It's my pleasure to be your moderator this evening, and as such, I'll work to keep the event on time, ensure your questions are answered fully, and that as many of your questions are answered as possible. Now, we have closed captioning for tonight's event, so if you'd like to turn the captions on, just move your mouse to the bottom of the video screen that you're watching, and you should see a CC icon for closed captioning. Click on that, and that will turn on closed captioning. At the outset of this evening's meeting, I'd like to acknowledge that Metrolinx operates on the traditional territory of Indigenous peoples, including the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people. We are all treaty people. Many of us have come here as settlers and immigrants in this generation or generations past. Metrolinx declares its commitment to building meaningful relationships with Indigenous peoples. Metrolinx acknowledges the historic and continued impacts of colonization and the need to work toward meaningful reconciliation with the original caretakers of this land. We acknowledge that Metrolinx operates on lands covered by 20 treaties, and that we have a responsibility to recognize and value the rights of Indigenous nations and peoples, and conduct business in a manner that is built on a foundation of trust, respect, and collaboration. Also, just before we begin, let's take a minute just to think about safety. Safety is incredibly important to the operations of Metrolinx, and we are all participating in these online meetings using our computer screens. Eye strain is a real problem. Metrolinx recommends using the 20-20-20 rule to prevent digital eye strain. That means take a break from your screen every 20 minutes for 20 seconds and look 20 feet away. Try it. It will really help your eyes. So, as I said, this evening's event is focusing on the EIAR. In particular, we're talking tonight about the stations from Gerrard to Exhibition. If you are interested in the other stations on the east and north, you'll find videos on the live meetings tab for the two events that were held last week, which provides information about those stations. This evening's session, focusing on the west and downtown portion, is scheduled to last until about 8 p.m. We're going to start off with a brief presentation from the Metrolinx panelists, and then we'll turn to your questions. In the question period, we'll start with the written questions that were submitted in advance, and if you want, you can just peruse those questions and upvote any that you'd like asked live during the meeting. And after that, we'll go to the Zoom room. And what we'll try and do is we'll do a few written questions, go to the Zoom room so that we've got lots of time for the oral questions, and then come back and finish up the written questions here afterwards. If we don't get to any of the written questions, Metrolinx staff does answer the questions over time. So your questions will not be ignored. It's just an issue of we want to get to the things that are on most people's minds. Now, I talked about the Zoom room. After the presentation, if you'd like to ask a question out loud, there's a yellow Join Zoom button that's right below the video window. And after you've seen the presentation, you can just click on that Join Zoom. And Caitlin Doherty is there. She'll be your Zoom moderator. And at the appropriate time, she'll tell you that you can turn on your microphone and we'll all be able to hear you ask your question. And of course, if you're in the Zoom room, please try and keep your question relatively short so that we can actually get everybody's questions in. Again, if you need closed captioning, simply click on the CC at the bottom of the video screen and you will be able to see closed captioning. So let me introduce our panelists for tonight. With us is Malcolm Mackay, the program sponsor for the Ontario Line project. James Francis is a senior manager on the environmental programs and assessment team. And Jesse Pakala is a project manager on the environmental programs and assessment team. We're also joined tonight by Vicki Wong, the Director of Property Acquisitions, and Richard Tucker, the Vice President for Subway Project Delivery for the Ontario Line. Welcome to all of our panelists. I believe, Malcolm, that you're going to lead off on the presentation.
Yes, I am, Joseph. Thank you very much, and welcome everyone to tonight's event. As Joseph described, we're going to be talking about the area between Gerrard and Exhibition. But let's introduce the Ontario Line with a quick recap. It's a subway that runs from Exhibition to the Ontario Science Centre with over 40 connections to other modes of transit, including subways, buses, LRTs, streetcars, and GO trains. The Ontario Line's expecting over 388,000 daily boardings, bringing over 227,000 people within walking distance of the subway, and up to 47,000 people within two jobs within 45 minutes of the subway. Next slide. So this is Gerrard Station. Gerrard is at the corner of Carlaw and Gerrard Streets. We're expecting during the peak morning hour to have 3,300 people passing through this station. And we have entrances on the northeast corner and the southwest corner of Gerrard and Carlaw. Next slide. Passing through the joint corridor area where we're running in the area with GO Transit, we come to Riverside Leslieville Station. Here, we're expecting to serve over 4,000 people during the peak morning hour, and we have entrances on both the north and south sides of Queen Street. Next slide. As we head south and over the Eastern Avenue Bridge, we come into East Harbour Station. East Harbour Station is where we have an interchange with GO Transit. Here in the AM peak period, we're expecting over 14,000 people per hour. As we go across the Don River, we come into the Don Yard area where we have a structure called a portal, and the portal is the entranceway to the underground section of the subway. Next slide. As we continue heading west, and in this case north, we come to Corktown Station. It's at the corner of King and Berkeley Streets, with its entrance on the southeast corner. This station, we're expecting over 4,000 people per the AM peak period hour. Next slide. Heading back up to Queen Street, we're at Moss Park Station at the corner of Queen and Sherbourne with over 7,300 passengers boarding and alighting during the AM peak period. The station entrance is on the northeast-west corner of Sherbourne and Queen. Next slide. Continuing west along Queen, we come to Queen and Yonge with the interchange station with Line 1. This is the busiest station for the Ontario Line with over 16,000 boardings during the AM peak period. Next slide. As we continue west underneath Queen Street, we come to another interchange station with the existing Line 1 subway, Osgood Station. Osgood will have over 12,000 people passing through the station during the AM peak period. Next slide. Once again, heading west, we get to the corner of Queen and Spadina. At Queen and Spadina, we have over 7,000 riders coming through during the morning peak hour, and we have entrances on the southwest corner and northeast corner. Next slide. As we head further west, we come to the King Bathurst Station, which is on the corners of King and Bathurst. Here we have entrances on the northeast corner of King and Bathurst and the southeast corner of King and Bathurst. We have over 5,000 people passing through this station during its AM peak hour. Heading to the next slide. We come to our terminal station at Exhibition. Here we have an interchange with GO Transit with over 12,000 people during the AM peak hour passing through this station. It also gives great access to Liberty Village. Next slide. So what are we expecting over the course of the next few years? Well, by mid-year 2022, we will have started construction for the exhibition early works, the Corktown early works, and the Lower Don Bridge and Don Yard early works. In late 2022, we're going to start the downtown early works, the Joint Corridor early works, and the East Harbor early works. By 2023, the two big projects which are currently in market, the South Civil Stations and Tunnels contract will begin, as well as the Rolling Stock Systems Operation and Maintenance contract will begin. By late 2024, we will have tendered and awarded the North Civil Stations and Tunnels contract, and construction will begin there. Next slide. Now we're going to pass it over to James to talk about the Environmental Impact Assessment Report. James?
Thanks very much, Malcolm. Next slide, please. So our environmental assessment work for Ontario Line, it's been well underway for the past few years. And for this work, we're following a project-specific environmental assessment regulation, which is similar to the transit project assessment process or the typical environmental assessment process for transit projects, in that it requires study of the existing environment, consultation with interested parties, and identification of mitigation to avoid or reduce impacts of the project on the existing environment. One way that the Ontario Line environmental assessment process differs from the typical environmental assessment process for transit projects is that it's phased. So we completed the first phase of the environmental assessment looking at existing conditions back in 2020 when we published the environmental conditions report. This report collected baseline information about all the typical environmental disciplines that we look at in a transit environmental assessment, like archaeology, cultural heritage, noise and vibration, the natural environment, socioeconomics, air quality, traffic, and soil and groundwater. The second phase of the Ontario Line environmental assessment process is early works reporting. And those early works reports build on the environmental conditions report with completion of standalone impact assessments for portions of the project that are proceeding to implementation ahead of main works. So we completed 5 early works reports through the end of last year for works at Exhibition Station, Corktown Station, the Lower Don Bridge and Don Yard, at East Harbor Station, and for the Lakeshore East Joint Corridor. And each of these reports has now been approved by the Minister of Environment, Conservation, and Parks. So we're now in the final phase of the Ontario Line environmental assessment process with the draft environmental impact assessment report, which was released for public review and comment on February 7th. The environmental impact assessment report looks at potential impacts of the overall project on the existing environment, which we first studied back with the environmental conditions report. And we look at those potential impacts during both project construction and project operation. And we then prescribe mitigation to avoid or reduce these impacts, as well as monitoring activities to verify mitigation effectiveness and inform any adaptive management that may be needed. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the next steps for the environmental impact assessment report. We issued the notice of the draft environmental impact assessment report on February 7th, which began a public review period which extends through March 9th. During the public review period, we're hosting virtual open house events like this one. And at these events, we're sharing key findings of the report, and we're hoping to encourage review and comment on the draft environmental impact assessment report. And we're also here to hear your feedback. We'll be responding to all the comments that we receive and updating the environmental impact assessment report to reflect the feedback that we do obtain during the review period. And we're then required by the Ontario Line environmental assessment regulation to issue a final environmental impact assessment report no later than 65 days after publishing the draft. Publishing the final environmental impact assessment report triggers an up to 35-day period during which the Minister of the Environment, Conservation and Parks can review the environmental impact assessment report. Following the Minister's review period, Metrolinx will then issue a statement of completion, which will formally conclude the environmental assessment process. Next slide, please. So the environmental impact assessment report, it's quite extensive. It's several thousand pages in length, and the full report with all of its appendices is available on our website, along with environmental topic-specific summary pages that we've crafted to help facilitate review. So for tonight's virtual open house, we wanted to provide an overview of the key findings and commitments for each of the environmental topics. And I'd like to start with construction noise and vibration management. Next slide, please, which is one of the topics we hear the most interest in, and share how Metrolinx takes a proactive approach to comprehensively managing noise and vibration from our construction activities. Next slide, please. So we model construction noise and vibration in the environmental impact assessment report, and we use conservative assumptions because of the current phase of planning and design that we're at. And these conservative assumptions include simultaneous use of construction equipment at full power throughout the entire project footprint. And our assessment, based on these conservative assumptions, it does show that construction activities will require mitigation, like phasing or coordinating the timing of specific construction activities, implementing site hoarding that's effective as a noise barrier, and using equipment on lower power settings at certain times of day. So the assessment that we include in the environmental impact assessment report, it's only the first phase of our work in this area. And we spell out and we commit to our next steps for managing construction noise and vibration in the environmental impact assessment report. So once our contractor is on board, they're required to complete site-specific construction noise and vibration management plans. And these plans detail specific mitigation solutions for each phase of their work, given selected means and methods. And these management plans, they're reviewed and they're approved by Metrolinx before any work begins. Our contractors are also required to continuously monitor both noise and vibration throughout construction, and that's to make sure that they're effectively managing both noise and vibration and introducing any additional mitigation measures that may be needed. We'll also have a fully accessible phone line throughout construction, as well as a responsive complaints process if there are any issues. And the images on this slide show a construction noise monitor at upper right and a vibration monitor at lower right. Next slide, please. So we also model noise and vibration from Ontario line operations in the environmental impact assessment report. And that's to identify where mitigation is needed and which type of mitigation solutions will be most effective. So for the tunnel portions of the project, vibration isolation to separate the tracks over which the subway trains will travel from the tunnel will be needed. And that's to keep noise and vibration below perceptible levels. So in some locations, special lower stiffness fasteners, and these are fasteners that connect the rails to track slab, those are recommended to isolate vibration. And in other locations, we recommend a rubber or a spring system under the track slab, but above the bottom of the tunnel to isolate vibration. So the images on this slide, they show the use of a rubber system under the tracks, and this is known as a floating slab system. And that's one of our mitigation measures that we're prescribing in the EIAR. So each of the solutions that we're prescribing will effectively limit transfer of vibration from the moving trains to the tunnel, which in turn limits any vibration that could travel through the ground to nearby buildings, and then either be felt as vibration or as noise generated by vibrations moving through a structure. So with the mitigation that we'll be implementing as part of the project, both noise and vibration from Ontario line operations through the tunnels will be below perceptible levels. And the assessment that we include in our EIAR demonstrates that this is readily achievable. So I wanted to also talk about noise and vibration along the joint corridor, so above ground noise and vibration. So we previously assessed noise and vibration along the joint corridor, and that's from future combined Ontario line and GO operations. And that was part of our Joint Corridor Early Works report, which we released for review and comment last September, updated in response to public feedback last November, and was approved by the Minister of Environment, Conservation and Parks in December 2021. So in this Early Works environmental assessment report, we committed to installing noise barriers along the joint corridor that, in combination with the use of quiet, electric, and automated trains by the Ontario line, as well as electrification of the vast majority of future GO trips, will result in lower noise levels than today at the majority of locations near the joint corridor. So the reductions that are achieved by this committed mitigation, and that's noise walls and GO electrification, as well as the quiet Ontario line trains, vary at each location near the joint corridor, but they're up to 10 decibels quieter, or about half as loud as current noise levels. Metrolinx is committed to ongoing engagement on the design of these noise walls, and that's to make sure that their look and feel integrates well with the surrounding neighborhood as planning and design progress. Next slide, please. So we know it can be challenging to conceptualize future noise levels, so we've created an immersive sound demonstration for the joint corridor, which presents both existing noise levels with corresponding video taken at locations along the segment of the Ontario line, as well as future modeled noise levels accompanied by three-dimensional animations or renderings of Ontario line operations at these locations. So an example of one of the future modeled scenarios is shown on this slide, which depicts a conceptual noise barrier along the joint corridor, as well as you can see here GO trains that we modeled. They're also Ontario line trains in the model and in the sound demonstration. So the immersive sound demonstration, I think it's a really neat tool. It allows for experiencing future noise levels and makes the decibel numbers that we present in our reports kind of come to life. So I'd very much encourage checking out the tool if you're at all interested in experiencing what future noise levels near the joint corridor will sound like. Next slide, please. So getting into cultural heritage, we are very aware of the important cultural heritage resources along the route of the Ontario line, and we're working to avoid impacts to these properties wherever we can, while accommodating the best transit solution. So the leftmost images on this slide, starting upper left, this depicts 378 Queen Street West at Queen and Spadina, and the image at lower left is 663 to 665 King Street West, that's at Bathurst and King. And each of those are locations of future station entrances. And these are locations where building facades will be retained in place throughout construction. Both of these buildings also include elements that will need to be removed to accommodate station construction, and these elements will be temporarily dismantled and then restored post. The image on upper right is Osgoode Hall, which is a known provincially significant heritage property where we're able to avoid any impacts to the building itself, but where we do need to impact landscaping and reposition the existing cast iron fence along the southwestern portion of the property, and that's to accommodate a station entrance. The image on the lower right shows a commemorative plaque at the first Parliament site, and that's another known provincially significant heritage property that I'll speak more to on the coming slides. And these are only a few of many heritage properties in the portion of the study area between Gerrard and Exhibition Station. So the Environmental Impact Assessment Report, it commits to mitigation for impacts to each potentially impacted heritage resource. Where impacts to heritage properties are unavoidable, like at some of our station locations, we're working closely with the city's heritage planning staff, as well as staff at our regulator, the Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Tourism, and Cultural Industries, on our plans to document and salvage heritage attributes, commemorate and interpret heritage sites, and design nearby Ontario line infrastructure in a sympathetic, compatible manner. Wherever heritage properties are near construction zones, we'll also be monitoring vibration at these sites throughout construction, and that's to make sure that vibration levels don't exceed thresholds that are protective of sensitive heritage structures. Next slide, please. So turning now to archaeology, most of the study area between Gerrard and Exhibition stations has been cleared of archaeological potential, and that's due to previous disturbance. But we do have two known archaeological sites, both at the location of the future Corktown station. The first is the Limekiln site, which is north of Front Street East, shown in the area shown in the north box and the image on lower right. And at the Limekiln site, quicklime was produced for mortar and for plaster construction back in the 1800s. The second known archaeological site at this location is the first Parliament site, and that's located south of Front Street. This was the site of pre-colonial Indigenous use. It was the location of Upper Canada's first and second Parliament buildings. The first Parliament buildings were burned down by American soldiers in the invasion of York in 1813, and the second Parliament buildings also burned down in 1824, and that was accidental and believed to have been from an overheated chimney flue. Following the use as the second Parliament site, the site was then home to the Home District Jail, which was in use from the 1840s to the 1860s, and was then home to a consumer's gas complex where coal gas was produced for both street lighting and heating, and that was starting in the 1880s. So we started archaeological fieldwork at the first Parliament site last year, and the picture on the slide here shows in-progress archaeological work from last fall. And our environmental impact assessment report, it commits to ongoing archaeological work at these sites to obtain archaeological clearance ahead of construction, and we commit to that for all the other areas in the study area retaining archaeological. So our archaeological assessment at this site, it's currently on pause, and that's while we're advancing demolition of the surface buildings to allow our investigations to continue, and we're also waiting for the grant to thaw. So we plan to continue our investigations as soon as we're able to this spring. Next slide, please. So this slide shows some of the past uses of the first Parliament site I was just speaking about. So the image on the top is an image of the first Parliament buildings. The image at middle left is an image of the second Parliament buildings. Middle right is Consumers Gas Facility from the Consumers Gas activities on the site. And then the lowermost image on the slide, that's a model of the archaeological finds to date at the site, which so far they're limited to the near surface industrial history. So you can see both a rail line and a railway turntable, and that railway infrastructure was used to support the Consumers Gas operation. So we're very much looking forward to what our upcoming archaeological investigations on the site will uncover, as well as reporting back on the input we received this past fall on themes for interpretation and commemoration of the very important history of this site to guide our upcoming work at the Cortan Station site. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Jesse now to take us through the findings of the remaining environmental topics that we assessed in EIAR.
Thanks, James. The Environmental Impact Assessment Report evaluates impacts to traffic from construction and operation of the project. The Transportation and Traffic Report, which is appended to the main EIAR, looked at potential impacts and subsequent mitigation measures for pedestrians, cyclists, public transit, and automobiles, including possible impacts on downtown parking. For example, to mitigate impacts from the Queen Yonge Road closure to facilitate construction of Queen Station, we commit to permanent enhancement of the streetcar network in the area in collaboration with the TTC. Additional committed mitigation measures during construction include maintaining northbound traffic flow on University Avenue using traffic controls, maintaining access to the many businesses and their loading docks in the area, as well as providing safe temporary detour routes for pedestrians and cyclists where required. Next slide, please. As part of the EIAR, we also looked at potential socioeconomic impacts. This involved identifying and assessing socioeconomic features and land use characteristics, including existing land use patterns, public transportation networks, public realm features, community amenities, neighborhood demographics, and also future development. In terms of mitigation, we commit to maintaining access to property, businesses, and recreational spaces throughout construction while avoiding disruptions as much as possible. We also commit to continued engagement with the City of Toronto and local communities on public realm, like the look and feel of future stations as design progresses. Next slide. For natural environment, we assess natural components like vegetation communities, fish and wildlife, habitat, and species at risk. Our subject matter experts first reviewed existing information from the Environmental Conditions Report from agencies like TRCA, Toronto Region Conservation Authority, and the Department of Fisheries and Oceans Canada. We supplemented this information by completing field surveys of plant communities and wildlife habitat. Our team then overlaid project designs within the study area to identify potential effects. We recognize that green space and parklands are limited resources in the city, and with this in mind, we are working to refine designs to minimize tree removals and protect trees wherever we can. That being said, the project will need to remove some trees in order to accommodate safe work zones during construction and to allow for new infrastructure. Where tree removals are required, we will take a surgical approach, protecting surrounding trees with barriers and performing removals outside of sensitive timing windows for wildlife as much as possible. We will compensate for all removals in accordance with city permitting requirements and by following the Metrolinx vegetation guideline, ensuring a higher degree of compensation for parks and natural areas and planting many more trees than we remove. We are also working with the City of Toronto and TRCA to identify local compensation opportunities and tree planting locations to help offset any required removals and contribute to ecosystem revitalization within the project area. Next slide, please. We previously assessed construction of the Lower Don Bridge as part of the Lower Don Bridge and Don Yard Early Works Report, which is a new bridge over the Lower Don River that will carry the future Ontario Line tracks. This Early Works Report was released for review and comment last June, updated in response to public feedback in August, and approved by the Minister of Environment, Conservation and Parks in September 2021. In this Early Works Environmental Assessment Report, we committed to working with government agencies to confirm construction techniques and timing as designs progress, ensuring that construction dewatering follows provincial and TRCA best management practices to prevent inadvertent discharge into the river, establishing and maintaining construction setbacks in the watercourse, and installing erosion sediment control measures beforehand and regularly inspecting these measures throughout construction to prevent sediment runoff. Lastly, we will continue to work with the TRCA to incorporate flood protection measures as we advance planning and designs for works in this area. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. Existing soil and groundwater conditions were assessed using available information to identify potential effects, mitigation measures, and monitoring activities during construction and operations. Further geotechnical and due diligence investigations ahead of construction will confirm existing conditions and inform project design to ensure potential impacts of soil and groundwater are either avoided or mitigated. We commit to proper handling and management of soil and groundwater during construction in accordance with all regulatory requirements and approvals. This includes the new excess soil regulation, as well as requirements pertaining to contaminated soils and dewatering. Once construction is complete, we do not anticipate any long-term effects during operations of the Ontario Line. Next slide, please. We assess potential impacts to air quality for both construction and operations as part of the Environmental Impact Assessment Report. The Ontario Line features electric trains that will improve local air quality by reducing direct emissions and taking cars off the road. Potential impacts during construction will be avoided through active monitoring and mitigation, including the use of dust suppressants, covering of stockpiles, using wind screening, and the implementation of proper excess materials handling and equipment washing procedures. Next slide, please. As many of you are already aware, the draft EIAR is now posted on our website for review and input until March 9th, after which public inputs will be reviewed and addressed for publication of the final Environmental Impact Assessment Report in April 2022. And with that, I will now hand the mic over to Vicky, who will provide further details on our property requirements for the project. Vicky?
Thanks so much, Jesse. Next slide, please. So if your property is needed for the project, owners will receive a letter, and there are different ways that properties may be impacted. The project may need some or all of the site permanently, such as for the construction of a station, or the need may be underground only, such as for the construction of the subway tunnel or to support that subway tunnel. There may be a need for a permanent easement, which means that Metrolinx does not need full ownership of the property, but does need a partial interest or access to the lands. Sometimes the need is for temporary use only, which means that after construction is completed, the lands will be restored to the same condition or better. Next slide, please. So receiving a letter is the first step. We would like to speak with you directly to explain details such as how much of the property is needed, why, what to expect in terms of timelines, such as when you will receive an offer, and answer any of your questions. As part of these conversations, we would like to negotiate with all owners to reach an agreement, and this includes compensation. Compensation for all properties impacted is based on the fair market value of the property, and this applies to whether or not it's a portion, such as that permanent underground easement, or in its entirety. And how do we determine this compensation? Well, this is estimated by an accredited third-party appraiser who will analyze each property on a case-by-case scenario, and we'd be happy to explain this analysis to you as part of our direct conversations. So if you received a letter, please do reach out to us through the Metrolinx contact name on that letter so we can speak more specifically to you about your property. And regardless of whether or not you've received one, if you have any questions about your property, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, being the property team, at the email address you see there, ontarioline@metrolinx.com, or the phone number, and we'll make sure you're connected to the right person. And thanks, I'll pass the mic over to Richard.
Thanks, Vicky. That's great. So as we move forward, what do we look forward to in 2022 if you live in or around this part of the Ontario line? Next slide, please. So there's we've divided up into three basic areas. So we have the winter works, which are around Corktown and exhibition stations. So there's surveys and investigations that are currently ongoing there. And you'll also, I'm sure, be starting to see some demolition work started, as well as the erection of some hoarding and for safety and enclosure of the site, and also setting up the site offices for the contractors and consultants on the job. In the spring and summer, that work will continue. And then we also have ongoing surveys and investigations, including archaeological work at Corktown. And at Don Yard, then we start to see some work going on there in terms of tree protection and removals. And there's a water main crossing of the main railway corridor that needs to be relocated, and that work will start. And we will also be starting to look at the bridges at Queen, Dundas, and East Harbour. And then going into the fall, we have work going on in the Queen Station and Joint Corridor area in terms of some further demolitions, looking at the tree protection and some removals. And that's the work that heads into the winter and fall of 2022. And with that, I'll hand it back to Malcolm.
Thank you, Richard. Next slide, please. Next slide. So as we're drawing to the end of our presentation here, we'd just like to remind you that we're available here should you have any questions whatsoever. You can reach out to us at our email address, ontarioline@metrolinx.com, or call us at 416-202-5100. If you're interested in joining up for our e-letter or gaining information, you can go to our website, metrolinx.com/OntarioLine, and we'd be happy to hear from you. Make sure you respond to with your thoughts on the environmental impact assessment report. That's very important, and it's all due March 9th of this month. So with that, we're going to go into the question and answer, and I'll throw it over back to Joseph. Joseph.
Well, thank you, Malcolm, and thank you to the panel. That was a great presentation. I found it really informative. So for people who are participating, you're going to hear me ask some questions from those that were submitted in advance. And what I've tried to do is pull questions that were voted for, but also some questions were asked during the course of the presentation. So people who were listening have asked a couple questions. And we will go over to the Zoom room so that if you want to ask your question live, you can do that. So if you want to ask your question live, now would be the time for you just to click on that yellow Zoom Join Zoom button so that you can be in that room. But you don't have to do that if you don't want to ask a question, because you'll continue to see everything right here. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to start off with a couple noise questions, because as we've gone through these meetings, noise comes back all the time. And I know as a person, I can hear noise, but I don't necessarily know what the studies mean. And I think there are two questions, one in particular, that has been rephrased previously and may be helpful in clearing some of the confusion. So I think, James, this is probably over to you in that you have been our presenter of the noise issue. So the first noise question is, the commenter is asking for clarification about the noise level of the trains on the joint corridor in the east, which you were talking about. And if I understand correctly, the electrified trains will be 10 decibels quieter than the current diesel GO trains, which sounds good. But currently, with 150 trains per day, there's a considerable period of time when there are 0 decibels of sound. If we go up to 1,500 trains per day, even if they are quieter, won't that mean that there'll be a net increase in the overall sound for residents who live and work so close by? So maybe not a loud train here and there, but more of a constant hum. James, can you help us, think this through?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Joseph. And Thanks for the question. And you're right. We have been hearing a fair amount of interest in this topic. So I'd like to maybe start from the top. So in our assessment, we look at noise of a single passing train, and the future Ontario Line vehicles will be considerably quieter than vehicles using the rail corridor today. We also look at all the rail traffic in future. So we look at the maximum anticipated or maximum planned GO service levels in the corridor, the maximum planned Ontario Line service levels in the corridor. So we're looking at all of those trains in future, and we model all of that. We modeled all of that as part of our joint corridor early works report, and with a few factors at play. So one is, as I said, the Ontario Line trains are considerably quieter than the trains using the rail corridor today. We also have GO electrification, where the majority of GO trips in the rail corridor will be electrified, and we're also committed to noise barriers in the joint corridor that will be at least 5 meters tall. And so with all of those factors brought in, all that committed mitigation, our future noise levels will be lower than current noise levels, and that's at the majority of locations near the joint corridor. And so the reductions are up to 10 decibels quieter. The reduction does vary based on location. So if you're interested in a specific location near the joint corridor, I'd recommend review of that report. It's Appendix C of our joint corridor early works report. That's also part of. We've also included it in the draft environmental impact assessment report. Just recognizing the interest in the topic, it's included as Appendix Q in that report. And I'd also recommend taking a look at our immersive sound demonstration. So in that immersive sound demonstration, we're modeling the future service. So all of that future service, and it will give you a sense of how quiet the future condition will be. So in our immersive sound demonstration, we've modeled future noise levels from GO and Ontario Line vehicles combined near the joint corridor at 6 different locations around the joint corridor. So I'd highly encourage checking that out. So thanks very much.
Okay, and James, thank you for that. I just want to come back to you just on that last point, because as a person, I actually live with a main road within. When I'm in my backyard, I can hear traffic on that main road, and at certain times, I know there's a lot of car traffic, and that's kind of a constant hum. And at other times, I know that there's truck traffic because it's louder. I think the point of this question that I hear people asking is that the difference between a loud train that comes from time to time, like a diesel, and because of the volume of trains, kind of a constant hum. Can you talk a bit about that, please, as opposed to just the absolute maximum and minimum, the general noise level that I might feel that I'm hearing, please?
Right, thanks, and that's I think that's a great way to look at it. So we also look at that existing ambient environment at all the locations where we model the future noise near the joint corridor, and with the increased train traffic, but with the quiet Ontario Line trains, with GO electrification, with the noise barriers, we're showing average noise, majority of locations quieter than today. So you're talking about kind of background noise, and that background noise, part of that is coming from current rail operations, and we're able to kind of drop that down.
Okay, thank you for that. And there is the sound demo, and there's a link from the Ontario Line page that people can go and try the sound demo that you talked about. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned electrification, and there's one related question that has come up before, and during the presentation, a person asked it. So talking about electrification, when will electrification occur? According to this person who asked the question, GO traffic may be diesel for up to another 15 years. Does that and you've talked about electrification, that case, is there a period of time? What's the period of time that people are going to have both the Ontario line, the additional traffic, and diesel trains? And how have you got studies that allow for that and the impact of that period of time?
Hi, Joseph. I can help with that one. So the electrification of the GO system, it's actually required in order for the frequency of trains for us to be able to operate. So it's not something that's optional. It has to occur. So we have a long delivery for the Ontario line. We're looking, at the end of this decade opening. The electrification is going to be running alongside with us through that build period, and carrying on. There is always going to be a mixed fleet, and that's the plans for the GO, that there will be both electrical and diesel, and we've modeled that. Along obviously with the quiet Ontario line. So electrification is coming. It is lined up to be delivered, and it will be happening in lockstep with the delivery of the whole subway program over the course of the next decade and into the next 10 years.
Thank you for that. Thank you. And thank you for those two. I think that you've helped for someone like me to understand, and I appreciated your answers. I'm going to ask a couple questions, and I think they're coming to you, Vicky, about expropriation. They're quite specific. And then we're going to go to the Zoom room, where I understand from Caitlin that there's a half dozen people who would like to ask questions. So we want to make sure that we have time for all those people. But a few rapid fire questions for you, Vicky, on expropriation. You talked about the valuation and a third party valuation. The questioner is saying that in today's heated housing market, fair market value based on historic sales is not reflective of current pricing. How will you account for that in your offer to acquired properties?
Thanks for the question, Joseph, and to the for the person that entered the question there. The simple answer is, with respect to fair market value, that is the price of the property based on the market conditions at that time. During the presentation, I was referring to accredited appraisers who will be completing reports to estimate that fair market value. They are experts in this field and will certainly be able to address this in that report, and we're happy to discuss that with you. I think that's the end of the answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, crisp question, crisp answer. Thank you. Another person, in terms of assessing, appraising the fair market value, this questioner is asking, if I want to retain my own appraiser, will Metrolinx reimburse me for it? And what's the reasonable cost that you'd cover for that?
The answer is yes. Metrolinx will pay you for the reasonable costs. These do vary per appraisers, that it is something that we commission just like anyone else that is providing a service. But again, fundamentally, we will be reimbursing you for those costs.
Okay, thank you very much. And one last question to you, and then we're going to the Zoom room. If a person's house is expropriated, or acquired, how much time do people have to vacate their houses? And in this particular market, what happens if they can't find an alternative housing situation?
Okay. Thanks, Joseph. Questions relating to timing, and I guess maybe I'll take a little bit of a step back and talk about timing of discussions with property owners as well, and how that ties into the question about relocation. So our goal fundamentally, we always reach out to owners as soon as possible with as much information as possible, and the timing of this aligns with when the property is needed for the project. I recall there's a caller in a Zoom room that actually asked that kind of question on Tuesday as well about timing of acquisitions. This will be staggered from now. Like sometimes we have conversations already in progress right now, and they will continue on this year, next year, and until 2024. This does mean typically vacant possession of that property, although of course we're looking at things on a site-by-site basis. So that's part of those direct conversations we'll be having specific to your property. A part of that conversation, though, of course, it's a two-way conversation. So we want to be listening to you about what your needs are, whether you're a business, are you a homeowner, what your situation is, and this includes that aspect of relocation. And we are ready and here and available to help you provide that kind of specialized support. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for that. That's clear and helpful. So we've covered two big areas at the beginning. We're not ignoring the rest of the questions, but let's go over to the Zoom room now for those people who are lined up and have a question that they want to ask out loud. Caitlin, are you able to take it over?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Joseph. And thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. Just a quick reminder, a friendly reminder to all of our questioners to please keep your questions brief and to the point as much as possible to allow enough time for everyone to get their question in. Now, with that said, our first questioner tonight is Waleed. Waleed, you are unmuted. Please go ahead. Oh, there you go. You should be unmuted.
Thank you, Caitlin. And thank you so much to the amazing panel answering all the questions, from the community members with regards to this environmental assessment report. I have two questions actually. So at a Moss Park Community Benefits Coalition meeting, we had over 30 we had about 30 people show up. Many Moss Park residents raised certain questions, specifically PCC residents, and they're concerned about pest control. So with all construction, there's always migration of pests, to certain units. So we're wondering, what Metrolinx is going to do with regards to that issue. And that was also raised by some business, someone from the business community as well. So that was the first question. My second question, it's very important that I get an answer to this. I actually was reviewing your final, let me just get the title. It's the Appendix B5 of the Ontario Line project, and also the final report. And I was looking for the Moss Park River. There's no mention of the Moss Park River. And I'm wondering if that was an oversight or where can I get this information? I'm looking to find out if there's any heritage or any designation that was connected to that river. I think it's a 1.5 kilometer tributary of Tidal Creek. And I think it also has Maple Leaf Stream and the Mutual Stream. I'm going to post on the chat. I think Caitlin can see this, but this could be helpful to provide context because it's very important that river is considered in environmental assessment. So those are my two questions, and thank you so much for having this session.
Hi, Waleed. It's Malcolm. I'll tackle the first part, and then I'll pass it to James and Jesse to talk to the second part. Nice seeing you again virtually. The pest control issue. So a lot of the pest issues come with the demolition of properties, and when we're doing that, we do a very active scan of the environments for pests as well as materials, hazardous materials, asbestos, and those sort of things. So we do a very thorough substance survey as well as an animal survey, and when we're doing that, we have obviously means and methods to keep the site well prepared and protected. We have all of our hoardings up and around the site. But we are not expecting a large migration of pests as a result of our work, especially in Moss Park, which is a park area, and it's an open cut excavation. So we're really not anticipating that there will be a long protracted pest control problem. And we're working quite closely with the city on all of our work in this area to make sure that everything is well coordinated. They also have some large construction projects that are going to be happening in the Moss Park area and are planned. So good question, and thank you very much for that. And I'll pass it over to James.
Thanks, Malcolm, and thanks very much for the question. So, in terms of a watercourse at Moss Park, our understanding is that there was a historic watercourse in this area, and that like many of the historic watercourses in this part of the city, it's no longer in its kind of natural state, and that stormwaters that would have been passed through that are now passing through the Don. The assessment that you were referring to, our appendix, it relies on information that we gathered from local authorities like Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks and the local conservation authority and site visits. But if there is any additional information, we'd be happy to receive it. If that's in the chat in the Zoom, that Caitlin will pass that through, and we will very happily take that feedback and take that into account as we're updating our EIAR. So thanks very much.
Okay, and Caitlin, are you able to hear us? I do apologize. It looks like. Oh, good. We have Caitlin. You are able to hear us there?
Yes, we are back connected. So sincere apologies to everyone in this Zoom room. Just as a reminder, this session is being recorded and will be available on our page afterwards. So apologies again for the audio cutting out, but it will be available on our website right afterwards. So thank you very much for your patience and understanding. The next question we have was submitted from Julian. And Julian's question is about the exhibition terminus station. Julian has some concerns about the impact on privacy and sunlight that the two 20-story condo towers will have on 5 Hannah Avenue residents in the Liberty Market Lofts. The Liberty Market Lofts is a 8-story condo building that has a substantial amount of south-facing units that have 17-foot floor to ceiling, glass windows. 2 new condo towers built within 50 meters of the Liberty Market Lofts would greatly reduce privacy and sunlight on their units. Have you considered the impact this will have on existing residents? And could you consider orienting the condo towers to the west of the Liberty Market Lofts so as to not obstruct and impact current residents? Thank you.
So, Julian, another great question. And so what we're doing as part of the transit build is we're building stations. We're building the subway network. There's a second stage of the program, which is the transit-oriented community program, which is what you're talking about here. That's being run by our colleagues at Infrastructure Ontario. They have a very active website that you can go to. It's engageio.ca, and that's where the transit-oriented community program is being delivered from. Please feel welcome to, if you want to send us an email at ontarioline@metrolinx.com. We'd be happy to put you in touch with the right people to be able to have this conversation. But as I said, the transit build and what we're delivering is very separate from the POC. So we will absolutely put you in place, in touch with the people that can help you with your question. Back to you, Caitlin.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Malcolm. Next up, we have Mary. Mary, you are unmuted. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Thanks very much, Caitlin. I didn't hear part of it, so I'm not sure what was said, but I have one question that relates to high-level design, Malcolm, and one that is about operation and maintenance of the Ontario line. And the first one is, if you could confirm the location or locations of any other permanent structures that will remain following the completion of the project above or adjacent to the Ontario line tunnels, such as intervention points, ventilation shafts, portal fans, electrical substations, equipment, and switch rooms. And lastly, if you could describe the efforts that will be made to ensure that trains that operate with wheel sets which do not emit noise from flats or other wheel defects, which may create noise in adjacent residential properties.
Hi, Mary. Yeah, I can absolutely answer your questions there. So first, I'll deal with the wheel flats. So number one, the wheel flats usually occur due to a very hard braking situation. The Ontario line, with its GOA4, which is Grade of Automation 4, has a completely automated system. It's driverless, so the braking and the stopping of the vehicles is all controlled so that that doesn't occur. In the event that it does occur, there is equipment on the vehicles to detect the flat, and that vehicle would be taken out of service and put into a wheel lathe where it would be corrected. So it becomes a maintenance issue at that point, and early identification of maintenance issues go a long ways to making sure that the trains are as quiet as they possibly could be. With respect to your second question, so what we have shown is the location of emergency exit buildings. We've showed the location of the major structures, the major structures being our stations, and where those entrances are. Integral to those stations in most instances is the ventilation grates and the piston effect dissipation from the train operations. So all that is really being put into the buildings as they exist. So they become really quite seamless to the casual people walking around. We don't have many grates in sidewalks anymore. We really try to avoid it. And when we do have something like that where we need to put in ventilation, we usually put in a small stack that gets us up a little bit higher. And it also means that people walking along the road won't be walking on those grates. So I'm hoping that covers the high level. As you also asked about tunnel ventilation and those sort of things, those are all built into the station boxes at the locations where they're required. So most of it's underground, most of it's in the station structures, and very hardly any of it is in the sidewalk. I'm hoping that answers your question, and have a wonderful evening. Back to you, Caitlin.
Thanks so much, Malcolm. All right, next up we have Stephen. Stephen, you are unmuted. Please go ahead and ask your question. Oh, Stephen, are you with us? Oh. Sorry. Let's try that again. Stephen, can you hear us? Oh. Malcolm, are you able to hear Stephen? We're having a little trouble on this end.
No, sorry, Caitlin, we can't hear Stephen.
Oh, okay. So sorry about that, Stephen. If you wouldn't mind, if you can send me a message in the chat, I would be happy to read out your question. Sorry about that. Some technical difficulties tonight, something I'm sure we're all quite used to this far into having experienced working from home and living from home. But next up, I'm going to go to Rosemary. Rosemary, go ahead. You are unmuted. Please ask your question.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for yet another presentation. So I'm going to go back to the very beginning part of tonight's presentation, which was the Gerard area. And so I know that that's going to be where the tunnel boring equipment is going to be stationed, and you're going to be removing all the dirt from the northern part to that location. So I'm wondering about all that dirt. Like, how much soil is there going to be? How many trucks a day are going to be leaving that intersection full of that dirt? Like, for how many months is that going to last? What route are those trucks going to take? I want to know where they're going through our neighborhood, and where is the ultimate location of all of the dirt that you're removing from the point north that's going to be stored at that tunnel boring location at Gerard. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary. Richard, you and I will share this one, obviously. So the launching of the tunnel boring machine from that location is an item that's going to take about 2 years in total for us to build and implement. Now, I say that we haven't yet got our North contract awarded, and ultimately the contractor will determine those durations. They'll also determine some of the trucking routes, the number of trucks, size of the trucks. We have estimates that we're working quite closely with transportation services to make sure that the road capacity is adequate. When we set up these sites, we also have a stockpiling ability. So if for some reason we don't take materials out of the site, we usually have between 2 and 3 days stockpiling capability within these sites. So all of this works into the ability for us to do a lot of our loading and loading out of the materials during normal daytime operations. And when we aren't, we have very strict noise criteria that are very well defined in our project output specifications to make sure that the adjacent neighborhoods aren't exposed in the nighttime or daytime to very high noises. Richard, maybe you just want to talk about the traffic management plan and how the constructors will mobilize to the site.
Yeah, one of the traffic management key items is that we'll be restricting their movements to major traffic routes in and out of the area. The exact route will, depend, as Malcolm said, on when the contractor's on board and where the spoil is headed. But again, we have to work that out with the City of Toronto at the time when we're finalizing these routes. And as I said, the route will be kept to major traffic routes to and from the site.
And one other thing is that you asked about where the material's going. That is also the responsibility of our project company, the constructor. And again, that hasn't been awarded, so where the materials are going hasn't been defined.
Yeah, I should add to that the spoil material is handled in compliance with the Ministry of Environment requirements that apply to spoil removal and management, which has recently been upgraded and is quite strict in terms of where the material can go and where it can be placed, and the accounting for the material, so that none of it's kind of ever gets lost, so to speak. Back to you, Caitlin.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Richard. All right, returning back to Stephen's question. Stephen asks, will there be a third set of Ontario line tracks to allow for maintenance? And if not, why not?
So I can answer that, Caitlin. Stephen, good question. Conventionally, we don't build triple lines like that for maintenance, especially with the new track types that we have, the fully welded rails. make for track repair much less. But it does happen, and it is required in the future. But we do that during evening shutdowns and that sort of thing. So like the TTC, we don't want to ever stop operations as best we can. But the building of a third set of tracks in order to accommodate those future maintenance periods is unwarranted, and it's not something which is cost prohibitive. It takes more property. It's more intrusive. There's no consideration for that. Now, that said, when we do a turnaround operation, if we have to, sometimes we put in a third track there. But what we found with our automated train system is that it wasn't required at the terminus stations at Science Center or Exhibition. So, anyways, good question. It's something which was talked about a lot when line 1 capacity was being dealt with, and it was a consideration then. But once again, it's a prohibitive cost to build that third rail. Back to you, Caitlin.
Thank you so much, Malcolm. And we're actually coming out to our last question in the Zoom room. Our last question is from Sarah. Sarah, you are unmuted. Please go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can.
Perfect.
Hi,
Thank
Sarah.
you. Hello, everyone. So my question revolves Queen and Yonge area. So I kind of have two questions, both with the Queen and Yonge area. The first one being, with the Queen Street closing for nearly 5 years, has the proposed additional work for the Yonge TO been taken into account when referring to the traffic flows, general access, and emergency routes around the buildings in the area and the hospital in the Yonge and Queen neighborhood? And then also, at the beginning, there was a lot of talk about noise and vibration for the finished product. So when the trains are actually running at the end of the decade, as Malcolm said, but what about during the construction, and particularly along the Queen Street closure, where the majority of the building of the understations are going to be done under stations that already exist? Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Sarah. Good questions. So without a doubt, the closure of Queen Street is a very choreographed exercise working with City of Toronto Transportation Services. So we have taken into account the Yonge TO. We've taken into account with them the emergency services, the access to the hospitals. All of those things are considered. The maintenance of the north-south arteries, Yonge Bay, is all key to making sure that the shutdown works. So this is, ultimately, it was City of Toronto Transportation Services presented to City Council what we had worked up with them and how we modeled it and how we worked together with them. And it was unanimously approved by City Council in support of the building of this major infrastructure. Your second question about noise and vibration. The tunnel boring, first off, we're going to have tunnel boring machines running very deep underneath Queen Street. The noise and vibration produced by that at that deep depth is going to be minimal, without a doubt. And we actually advance these tunnel boring machines about 10 to 15 meters a day. So the proximity with respect to any one location is usually just over a day, and then the equipment is gone. As for the construction of our stations, I'm going to let Richard go on about that, but we're doing some very unique construction methods here in order to minimize our impact to the streets, to make sure that we don't do open cuts in the streets. We make sure that the transportation surface network is maintained. All the traffic around our sites is maintained, and once again, working quite closely with City of Toronto Transportation Services to make sure that the city still functions. But with respect to noise and vibration, Richard, maybe you could just talk about the sequential excavation method of building these stations and how exciting this is at our Queen Street locations.
Yeah, in fact, the Queen Street station is the only station that's in the street. It has to be accessed in the street, and that's because of the 4 big buildings on the existing corners. Otherwise, we would have tried to figure a way to get it off the street. But notwithstanding that, we have 2 shafts that go down either side of Yonge Street and either side of the Line 1 station that exists there, and we go well down into the bedrock. When we get to the bottom, they use these machines called road headers, which kind of look like a hedgehog with a spinning metal ball on the end, and essentially that eats away at the rock, some 30 meters under the ground, and basically they create a cavern for the station by working their way through that. And the reason it's called the sequential excavation method is it was developed in Austria in the 60s, and they basically have a pattern where they gradually excavate in a way such that the stability of the rock is always maintained as they work their way down. And basically they do these panels, and then they move ahead another few meters, and they do another set of panels in the same way, and they're continually just moving their way forward using these machines. The spoil is then lifted out from the 2 holes at either end using a bucket with a crane, and it's placed into a dump truck and removed from the site. And in that way, we have minimal disruption because the Line 1 station above on Queen sits on top of the bedrock, and we're probably, I think we're about 8 meters underneath that to the top of the cavern. And essentially, we don't ever directly touch the underneath of that TTC station box, and essentially only our connections are through the sides and into the existing. In fact, there's an old Queen Street streetcar loop that was pre-built as part of that station a long time ago, and we're using that really as the way to get into the station. So it's kind of a new use for an old structure that's that a lot of people don't even realize is currently there. So back to you, Caitlin, or I guess it's maybe to Joseph. So if we don't have any more questioners.
Well, Caitlin, are we done with our questions in the Zoom room?
I believe that is all the questions that were in the Zoom room tonight. Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, thank you, Caitlin, and thank you to the people in the Zoom room. So we have about 10 minutes left, and we have some questions that were written beforehand and submitted during the meeting. So, Richard, while you're on your feet, figuratively, I'm going to come back to you.
Sure.
So this is about the tunnel running south from the Corktown station, and the questioner is asking, will tunnel boring machines be used, and how long will it take for that stretch of tunnel to be dug? And then will there be permanent vibration and noise once the tunnel is finished and the subway is running?
Okay, so the tunnel south from Corktown then heads down towards the railway corridor and turns towards the east to come up to the surface. The tunnel itself, the means and methods are up to the contractors, the bidders who are currently bidding on the project, and they could use TBMs in one particular way they could do it, or they could also use SEM method that we just talked about. So either of those are potential solutions that they could propose as part of their bid. In terms of, and most of that tunnel is in the rock, except when it starts to, just when it comes into the railway yard, actually underneath the GO tracks, there's going to be a portal created in the Don Yard, and that's the point where they come out of the rock. So the tunnel's not really that near to the surface until it gets actually underneath the GO train tracks. But even then, it's still probably 10 to 12 meters under the surface. So when I use the term near, it's all relative. So then the other part about noise and vibration is absolutely not. I think James can talk to that a little bit more, but as our noise and vibration expert. But my understanding is that essentially with the design of the Ontario line and the modern trains that we're using and the GOA4 systems and the kind of track design that we use in these tunnels, basically I think the word I've heard used is imperceptible, but James can maybe back me up on that one.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Richard. So as part of the environmental impact assessment report, we did study operational noise and vibration, and Richard, you're absolutely right. Throughout kind of entire length of tunneled segments, we're below perceptible levels. We're including in our design a variety of mitigation measures to get us there. But once the subway is up and running, we there won't be noise or vibration that you can feel or hear underground as a result of the trains running, and that's kind of thanks to modern technology. We've really come quite a long way in the past decades.
Thank you for those answers, Richard and James. Staying with the Parliament land, there's a question about, will you agree to a community monitor on the site? How will you manage and coordinate the overall disruption that will take place to the Parliament site to ensure the downtown area is safe and livable? Is there a mechanism for reporting to residents and letting them know what's going on? So a community monitor, is that something that could be in the cards?
So I'll leave that for Malcolm to discuss, because there's ways to that.
Yeah, no. The first thing that we do when we come into a community is we set up what's a CLC. It's a community liaison committee for construction. And it's made up of local residents who have an interest in the work that we're undertaking. And what we make sure is that we tell them what we're doing, when we're going to be doing it, so there's no surprise. And it also gives them the venue and the opportunity to provide us with feedback. We'll also have a 24-hour hotline set up, so if there was something that went slightly awry one evening, that they could certainly get in touch with us and we could immediately correct it. And that would be monitored 24 hours a day. So without a doubt, community engagement during the construction process is key to the successful delivery of the Ontario line and really any of our big projects. So that will go a long way. And then, as we're getting closer to opening, all of that information will be shared, and it starts to become more exciting as the fences start to come down, and the reality of the opening of the line starts to happen. So it's a long engagement, and we are certainly prepared for it, and we are expecting the community to engage us in that way. Very active. Joseph?
Okay, thank you for that. You had, I think, James, you had spoken about the sound barriers. And I don't know whether this falls in your bailiwick, but the question is about the sound barriers and their impact on sunlight for those people who are adjacent to them. And the questioner is asking, how much higher will the sound barrier walls be compared to the existing rail corridor in the East End? And will there be a noticeable decrease in the sunlight that gets through to people who are in the parks and nearby roads? Will it have a massive field compared to the former railway barrier walls and trees, or are there planned mitigating strategies? So again, am I going to feel like I am in shadow walking next to a big wall? Can you talk a bit about the light aspects of the barriers, sound barriers?
So I can lead off with that one, Joseph. So the sound barriers and retaining walls are something that we're having a very active discussion with the local community about, and we're working quite closely with them to develop design excellence principles to be able to make sure that what the ambitions and interests are of the community can be reflected in those walls. So we do have the ability with the noise walls to have them be transparent and allow all light through. We can make them opaque or colored to allow some light through, or they can be totally opaque, and that would be solid. So they all have slightly different properties with respect to noise attenuation, but they are all very similar. So there isn't a great deal of gain by changing materiality, but there without a doubt is some work that we're doing and it'll be conducted over the course of the next 3 months. While we very actively engage the community and get the design excellence principles buried and then nested into the joint corridor work that we're going to be tendering in April.
Okay, thanks. And is there somewhere here information on the different sound wall designs that you just described and an opportunity for people to comment on them?
Yeah, we've actually done presentations previously. They're available on our website, where we talked about what was called the kit of parts, which are the various things that we can do with the retaining walls and noise walls to put them together in different ways in different areas. So yeah, it's all right now available on our website from previous meetings.
Okay, and perhaps the Metrolinx team, when you're putting an answer to this particular question in writing, if you could just provide a link to that, then anyone who comes and sees this can go and get that other information just by following the link. A question you mentioned earlier about air vents and grills in the ground, there is a question, and you may have answered it, but I just missed it. But if the public wants to know where the subway air vent locations are going to be located, and especially with regard to the King and Bathurst and Queen and Spadina areas, is there some place that they can go and find where those air vents will be located at those intersections?
So as I said, in most locations, and I can say specifically to Queen and Spadina and King and Bathurst, is that the air vents are integral to the station building, and so there won't be vents in the sidewalks or in the street. So I think that specifically answers the question, but we do have layouts of our work that's happening. I don't recall anywhere in the alignment, and Richard, correct me if I'm wrong, where we have ventilation that's in a sidewalk. The only place that I can think of where we have ventilation like that is at Queen Station. And we're actually, as I said earlier, we're building a small projection that will allow the ventilation to go out the top. And we've worked quite closely with the City of Toronto to make sure the sight lines are all right for the old City Hall and make sure it fits in as best as possible. But I don't recall anywhere where we have vents in the sidewalks.
Yeah, Malcolm, the location you're talking about at Queen and Yonge is the Queen Station is the only one I'm aware of, and that was we've been working on ways to either, as you say, come out of a feature at the top or be associated with the building itself in that area. So again, that's the only one, and it's relatively small, even if it's still there.
Okay, and we've got time for one more question. It's a two-part question, and it's about the crossing of the Don River by East Harbor. And the questioner is asking, is there a pedestrian or bike bridge or pathway planned here? And also, more generally, how is the bridge going to impact the Don River ecosystem? So biking, pedestrians, and then the bigger impact. I know that's a lot for our last question, but could you talk to us about the bridge over the Don by East Harbor, please?
Yep, we sure can. So, Joseph, this is kind of an exciting part of the project. It's a signature bridge. It's going to be beautiful. It's a tied arch bridge. It looks very similar to the bridge that's going over the Humber River at the other end of the city. So it's something which is going to be a really nice bookend. The bridge actually spans the entire waterway, so we're expecting that the ecological impact to the Don River is not going to be there because our abutments will be on land. As for the multi-use path, so we're working quite closely with our East Harbor development team, and there is a desire to get a multi-use path going over the Gardner that will get to the link between the east and west side of the Don River in this location. And that's part of the overall program that's being delivered by the developer and the East Harbor team for that station. So multi-use path, yes, and exciting bridge for sure.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And thank you to the panelists, all of you, for your answers. For people who are watching, you may notice that I didn't address some of the written questions. Tonight is the fourth of these events that this panel has done last week and this week. And there were some questions that were asked at several meetings. So for those that have already been asked and answered at previous meetings, if you just want to go to the live meetings button, you can review the videos. You can also see written answers that Metrolinx will be posting. And rather than taking the time to cover questions that may have been answered a couple times already, I'd like to refer you there. Now, these have been 4 information sessions with presentations, with questions and answers, but this is in service of getting your feedback by March 9, the deadline. So there is a yellow button right above the pictures of the panelists, and it says comment on the draft environmental assessment impact assessment report. If you click on that, you will find that it takes you to a page where you've got the draft environmental assessment report if you haven't seen it yet, and all of the appendices. And you'll see down below it says stay involved. If you want, if you've done a brief, if you want to send a paper, there is an email link, ontarioline@metrolinx.com, so you can send it via email. Or if you just want to provide your comments right here, there are 3 questions and text boxes where you can submit your comments to Metrolinx regarding this report. The deadline is March 9th, so you have 6 days. This is important. This is an important part of the process and an opportunity for you to have your say. I hope that everybody who has participated tonight has found that the questions were answered, that you got the information that you needed so that you can participate, and that you find that this was worthwhile. Again, thank you to Caitlin in the Zoom room. Thank you to everybody there. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you all. Please stay safe. Good night.